Every Easter, millions of families get together. They spend time with each other, they make meals, laugh, and celebrate. Every Easter, millions of families hide eggs, and millions of children find those eggs. With all the attention on things found, it's so easy to forget that every Easter, someone is lost. As the phone rang, Karen massaged her temples. Eyes closed and jaw clenched, she fought back the building anger and frustration. Marcus had already called at least 20 times. It was in the fucking agreement. He knew it wasn't his weekend with Laura, and that wouldn't change. Fighting all the month's troubles and worries, she concentrated hard on not losing control. Laura had the TV in full volume as she ran around the house that was only 20 days away from being foreclosed on.
Mommy, I want to find the eggs.
Laura repeated over and over as the phone continued to ring, go to voicemail, and start ringing again. The cacophony of irritants poured into Karen's ears, drowning out her own inner voice. Her blood began to boil as she felt the temperature of her face increase and the room start to crowd in. That cheating bastard had the nerve to call for their daughter and her day, after everything he put her through. Eyes closed tight, fists clenched hard, and face scrunched in anger, Karen couldn't stand it anymore. Slamming her palms on the table, her slender frame snapped out of the chair and carried her towards the still ringing phone with a speedy determination. Gripping the ringing annoyance by its cords, she pulled hard and ripped them from the wall, silencing the device indefinitely. The TV switched to a loud, obnoxious commercial about fibromyalgia, and Karen's attention switched from the phone to her daughter, who stood there motionless and quiet, staring at her. "Laura, turn off that TV right now!" Karen barked out, but as her 6-year-old daughter's eyes began to water and lips started to quiver, so too did Karen's rage abruptly cool. With a soft, regretful tone, she soothed, "What do you say we make some Easter eggs so the Easter Bunny can hide them?"
Okay.
Laura mumbled out sheepishly, rubbing tears from her eyes. Having quieted her home and her mind, Karen began to set up all the things necessary for dyeing the eggs she had boiled earlier. Standing eagerly in a chair, the wide-eyed Laura spent the next hour with her mother, making 48 multicolored disaster eggs. After thoroughly wearing herself out, Laura made it to the couch before completely crashing out. Breathing deeply, Karen took a few moments of silence to compose herself. She loved her daughter deeply, but there were times when the stress of life was just too much. Tirelessly, she combed the backyard, searching for the best spots that wouldn't be too hard but also not too easy. After hiding away a majority of the eggs, uneasiness began to set in. The hairs on the back of Karen's neck raised, and a shiver went down her spine. She knew all too well the feeling of being watched. At the end of Karen's yard, when the grass meets the forest, a bush started rustling. Stopping in her tracks, Karen focused her attention on the bush. Wildlife wasn't a common sight this close to her house. Again, the bush rustled, seemingly more violent this time. This was definitely not her imagination. "Hello? Is anybody there?" Karen nervously called out. As if in response to her question, the bushes began shaking again, this time more aggressive. Nervously, Karen approached the woods, taking slow, cautious steps. Almost close enough to touch the bush, she stopped, heart pounding, senses heightened off adrenaline. She stood motionless. Suddenly, bursting out of the bushes, a pure white rabbit leaped towards Karen. Scared shitless, she let out a stifled scream as she fell backwards onto the grass. From a seated position, the rabbit and Karen looked at each other as she let out a nervous laugh. Sniffing the air, the rabbit hopped about aimlessly as 2 more white rabbits made their way out of the bush. So relieved that the perceived threat turned out to be harmless, Karen stood up and finished hiding the eggs. She didn't even give a second thought as to why domesticated rabbits might be in the woods behind her house. Soon enough, they wandered away, leaving no evidence of their visit. Rubbing sleep from her eyes, Laura emerged from the sliding back door, looking both exhausted and excited.
Did the Easter Bunny come, Mommy?
She asked through a wide, semi-toothless smile. Yes, honey, he hid all your eggs and is just waiting for you to come find them. Giddy with anticipation, Laura stomped her little feet as she ran around the kitchen, waiting for her mother to get her Easter basket and start the challenge. With her basket in hand and her mother watching, Laura tore around the yard with utter glee, searching for and finding eggs. A few minutes into the egg hunt, Laura's cell phone rang. Seeing that it was her attorney, she had to take the call. Karen was desperately trying to get a continuance on her home's foreclosure. If Karen and her lawyer couldn't get it, well, she didn't know what she would do. As her mother was on the phone, talking about boring stuff, something caught Laura's attention. Something large and white in the woods, just beyond the yard. Laura gasped. It couldn't be.
Mom! The Easter Bunny!
Stepping out from behind a bush, a man in a bunny costume silently waved at Laura. Excitedly, she waved in response, looking back and forth from her mother, who was facing away from the woods, and the man, whom she thought was the Easter Bunny. Turning around, the man began to slowly walk into the forest. Not wanting to lose her chance to meet the Easter Bunny, and receiving no response from her mother, Laura ran after him. I don't care what you have to do, Matt. Just do it, okay? And Karen hung up the phone. Burying her face in her hands, hopeless and exacerbated by her conversation, she pressed her fingers into her eyes and concentrated on the color patterns and spots that it made. The drained and defeated Karen lifted her head and with her puffy eyes scanned the yard. Not seeing her daughter, a motherly panic set in. Laura? Karen called out as she more frantically started searching the yard. Laura! Stopped mid-sentence. She noticed a trail of eggs that led into the woods. Frantically, Karen ran as fast as she could while still tracking the egg trail. With little attention on her surroundings, branches and sticker bushes battered against Karen's exposed face and arms. Abruptly, the trail of eggs ended. Neatly placed was Laura's Easter basket. True panic setting in, Karen's mind ran through every worst-case scenario as she furiously scanned the area. Just in the clearing ahead, motion caught her eye. Throwing her body through a thick wall of bramble, with no thought to the physical ramifications, Karen crashed into the clearing. The scene before her robbed the little remaining breath from her lungs and caught her hard in her throat. Kneeling in wait was a tall man in a white bunny costume. With one arm around Laura, she grinned excitedly, and one behind his back, holding a large butcher's knife that reached out from the other side and gleamed menacingly in the sunlight. Laura, reading her mother's bloodied and battered face that held a look of desperate horror, knew something was wrong. Through choking, tearing breath, Karen began to say, Please, if you just... Standing up, the man placed a large mitted hand that grasped the butcher's knife on Laura's head, gently but firmly holding her in place. His other hand shot up, index finger extended and placed it on the smiling mouth of the costume rabbit mask, shushing Karen. He then pointed the white, grimy mitt at Karen and motioned for her to approach. Silently she obeyed. Eyes on her daughter, Karen walked towards the man, slowly and deliberately. Within arm's reach, the man's hand shot out and grabbed Karen by her neck. Slowly he pulled her towards him, head cocked and examining his new victim. Laura began to sob. Slowly, Karen moved her right hand to her daughter's face and gently caressed her cheek. Desperately, she tried to think of a plan, but the man was too big, too strong, and too fast. The realization that there wasn't a way out for both of them set in. Karen knew what she had to do. A single tear rolled down her cheek, leaving a clean trail along her bloodied skin. Moving her hand to the front of Laura's shirt, she amassed as much of the fabric in her grip as she could. Looking up at her mother with concern, their eyes met for what would be the last time. Shifting her gaze back to the man, Karen suddenly and explosively ripped Laura from his grasp with all the strength she could muster. She flung her daughter backwards as far as she could. As the man's attention shifted to the now airborne girl, Karen brought her arm back in a swinging arc and buried her elbow into the side of the man's face. Slowly, as if unaffected, the man turned his head to face her. Run! Karen screamed out. Grabbing the man's hand that held the knife, she bit down as hard as she could. Laura, who really didn't understand what was happening, obeyed her mother and ran as fast as she could. She heard screaming, but didn't dare look back. Tears pouring out of her face, she ran all the way home without stopping. Knowing there wasn't anybody at her house, Laura ran to the next-door neighbor's house. Crying hysterically and pounding on the door, she found safety as they took her in and immediately called the police. Over the next few hours, the police organized a full-scale search party. Over 30 men and women combed those woods. They brought in dogs, helicopters, even brought in the media. The neighbors helped canvass the area, but after 3 straight days of searching, they had to call it off. The only thing they ever found was Laura's Easter basket, containing a bloody piece of Karen's shirt. Laura went to live with her dad, and she never had to go back to that house. 1 year later, on Easter morning, a package sat on the porch of Laura's home. Her father discovered this package and brought it in. As Marcus opened the small, ornate package, Laura watched excitedly. Removing the lid, they both peered into the box. Neatly set in the center of the present was a white rabbit figurine. Not knowing any better, Laura reached in and grabbed the trinket, further examining it. Under where the rabbit had been, Marcus noticed a card. Grabbing and unfolding it, the words made his blood run cold. "Happy Easter. Love, Mommy." Marcus snatched the vile thing from Laura's hands and immediately called the police. On arrival, they searched the area and house but found nothing. Taking the box and its contents as evidence, the police left an officer stationed outside their home overnight. A week had gone by, and the detective came to speak with Marcus in private. It turns out they analyzed the little rabbit, and it was from Laura's mother. Well, rather, it was her. After matching the DNA, it was concluded to be carved bone, more specifically, Karen's femur. The next day, Marcus and Laura moved, far away. But no matter how far or how many times they moved, every Easter, Laura received another present. Happy Easter. Love, Mommy.
Hello, mortals. The Disciple here. I hope you enjoyed my video. And I hope you were scared. Because I feed off your fear. So if you did enjoy it, throw a like, subscribe, or whatever the fuck you want. You want to talk some shit in the comments? I'll talk some shit. Either way, let's do this again sometime.